A perfect marriage, a brilliant career, a beautiful home overlooking the city. From the outside, Ethan Hayes had forged the American dream with his own two hands, his devoted wife Clara, the silent, steady architect of his world. But behind the closed doors of their life, a different story was being written. One of secret phone calls, stolen weekends, and a fatal ambition that knew no bounds. He was willing to burn his entire world down for the intoxicating promise of a new one. What he never imagined was that the woman he betrayed it all for was the daughter of a man who owned the fire itself. Ethan Hayes believed in aesthetics. It wasn't just his profession as a rising partner at the prestigious architecture firm Hawthorne and Finch. It was his life's creed. His home, a sprawling minimalist marvel in the hills of Bel Air, was a testament to this belief. Its floor-to-ceiling glass walls looked out onto a Los Angeles that glittered like a carpet of scattered diamonds at night. His car, a slate-grey Porsche 911, was a symphony of engineering and design. And his wife Clara was, to his discerning eye, the most beautiful aesthetic of all. Clara was elegance personified, with the kind of understated grace that made couture look like it was made for her, and her alone, she moved through their world with a quiet confidence. She had been the one who'd read his blueprints until 3 a.m. Her background in art history, providing insights that elevated his designs from merely functional to iconic. She had been the one to charm potential clients at stuffy dinners, her quiet intelligence a soothing balm to his often abrasive ambition. She had given up her own promising career, a PhD program at Columbia, focusing on Renaissance patronage to become the bedrock of his. Everyone said they were the perfect couple, a partnership of mind and spirit. For 15 years, Ethan had believed it too. But lately, the perfect lines of his life had begun to feel like the bars of a gilded cage. The problem wasn't Clara, not really. The problem was the reflection he saw in her eyes. She still looked at him like he was the same brilliant, hungry young man she'd fallen in love with, the one who sketched designs on cocktail napkins and dreamed of building skyscrapers. She didn't see the man he had become, a man who now sat on boards, who commanded 7-figure fees, and who felt a gnawing, insatiable hunger for more. More prestige, more power, more life. The routine had become suffocating. The Wednesday night dinners with the same predictable couples, the annual charity circuits where he'd shake the same hands and smile the same false smile. Even Clara's unwavering support started to feel less like a comfort and more like a quiet expectation. Her love was a gentle, constant warmth, but he craved a wildfire. The first crack appeared during the bidding for the new Davenport Museum of Modern Art. It was the kind of legacy project that architects would kill for a chance to etch one's name into the cultural landscape of the city. Ethan poured every waking hour into the proposal, his mind a whirlwind of cantilevered balconies and light-filled atriums. One night, hunched over his drafting table, he felt Clara's hand on his shoulder. "It's beautiful, Ethan," she whispered, her eyes tracing the lines of his design. "But the west-facing gallery. Have you considered the afternoon solar gain? The UV exposure could be detrimental to the collection unless you use prohibitively expensive glazing." She was right, of course. Her practical academic mind had spotted a flaw his soaring ambition had overlooked. A year ago, he would have kissed her, grateful for her partnership. Tonight, a strange and ugly resentment curdled in his gut. Her pragmatism felt like an anchor holding him back from the stratosphere. "I have it handled, Clara," he said, his voice sharper than intended. He didn't look up from the blueprint. The silence that followed was heavy. He heard her soft intake of breath, the rustle of her silk robe, as she turned and left the room. He didn't look up. He just kept drawing the scratching of his pen on the vellum, filling the void where her presence had been. He won the Davenport contract a month later, and the victory felt hollow, the taste of ash on his tongue. He celebrated with his partners, popping champagne that cost more than a month's rent on their first apartment. When he got home late that night, Clara was asleep, a book resting on her chest. A single tear-like smudge stained the page. He felt a pang of something, guilt perhaps, but quickly smothered it with the intoxicating thrill of his success. The cage was getting smaller, and he was starting to look for the key. He had no idea he was about to find it, not in a lock, but in a pair of laughing emerald-green eyes. The key had a name: Serafina Vincenzo. Ethan met her at a rooftop fundraiser for the very museum he was now designing. She wasn't like the other women there, the wives of bankers and tech moguls who were draped in legacy jewels and brittle smiles. Serafina was a storm in a Chanel dress. Her laughter was loud and uninhibited, her dark hair a wild cascade down her back, and her eyes held a spark of delightful chaos. She was the daughter of some vague European industrialist, whispered to be ferociously wealthy and intensely private. She approached him by the bar, a flute of champagne in her hand. "You're Ethan Hayes," she stated, not asked. Her voice had a husky, continental accent that was impossible to place and utterly captivating. "The man who's going to build my new favorite place in the city." "I hope I don't disappoint," Ethan replied, his practiced charm kicking in. "Oh, I have a feeling you rarely disappoint," she said, her gaze lingering on his for a beat too long. That was the beginning. Their conversation that night was a revelation. She didn't care about the practicalities of architecture. She cared about the passion, the ego, the sheer audacity of creating something from nothing. She spoke of art not as a historian like Clara would, with dates and provenances, but as a visceral experience. She talked about a Rothko painting, making her want to weep and scream at the same time. She saw the man he wanted to be, the visionary, the titan, not the husband who had to be reminded about UV protective glazing. Their affair started with a shared car. After the event, a harmless nightcap at a quiet hotel bar, and a kiss in the elevator that felt like a lightning strike. It was intoxicating, a fever that burned away the stale familiarity of his life. With Serafina, he wasn't just Ethan Hayes, the successful architect. He was Ethan, a man of boundless potential and intoxicating charm. Serafina's world was one of impulsive decisions and limitless resources. One afternoon, she texted him, bored, "Meet me at Santa Monica Airport in an hour." He cancelled a meeting with his structural engineers and arrived to find her waiting by a private jet. They spent the next 2 days in a villa in Cabo, drinking tequila under the stars and making love with a desperate, frantic energy. He felt alive, reborn. He justified it to himself with practiced ease. This wasn't about love. It was a necessary escape, a pressure valve for the immense stress of his work. It had nothing to do with Clara, but the lies began to stack up like poorly designed bricks, each one threatening the foundation of his life. Late night at the site, he'd text Clara while he was actually at an exclusive underground art auction with Serafina. "Stuck in a meeting with the city zoning board," he'd say when he was driving with the top down along the Pacific Coast Highway, Serafina's laughter whipping in the wind. Clara, in her quiet, trusting way, seemed to accept it all. She'd leave a plate of dinner warming for him in the oven, a silent testament to her patience. Sometimes he'd come home, the scent of Serafina's exotic perfume still clinging to his suit, and find Clara asleep in their bed. The sight of her so peaceful and unsuspecting would send a shard of guilt through him. But the guilt was always fleeting, quickly replaced by the thrill of his double life. The contrast was stark and addictive. Clara's world was one of quiet evenings, classical music, and intellectual companionship. It was safe, predictable, and supportive. Serafina's world was a whirlwind of exclusive parties, spontaneous trips, and a passion that bordered on reckless. It was dangerous, exhilarating, and deeply flattering to his ego. One evening, as he was dressing for a dinner he'd told Clara was with a client, she came into their walk-in closet. She held up 2 ties. "The silver complements the grey in your suit," she said softly, "but the navy brings out your eyes." It was the kind of intimate, thoughtful gesture she had made 1,000 times. He was on his phone, texting Serafina a confirmation. "The silver is fine," he said, not looking up. He felt her stand there for a moment, her stillness a palpable force. When he finally glanced up, he saw an expression on her face he'd never seen before. It wasn't anger or suspicion. It was a profound, aching sadness, a look of quiet disillusionment. "All right, Ethan," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She put the navy tie back on the rack and walked out. He stood there, the silver tie in his hand, a cold dread creeping into his chest. For the first time, he realized that the foundation wasn't just cracking. It was about to shatter, and in his arrogance, he believed he would be the one to decide when and how. He was wrong. The shattering began with a single audacious demand from Serafina. They were in her penthouse apartment, the city lights a distant, blurry constellation below. She was tracing the lapels of his jacket, her emerald eyes intense. "I'm tired of hiding, Ethan," she murmured. "I don't want to be your dirty little secret. I want to be on your arm at the Ethelred Gala. I want everyone to see you with me." The Ethelred Foundation Charity Gala was the absolute pinnacle of the LA social calendar. It was an event where careers were made and broken in the space of a champagne toast. He and Clara had gone every year for the past decade. It was their tradition. His firm always bought a table. Going with Serafina would not be a subtle hint. It would be a public declaration of war. It would be the end of his marriage, played out in front of the city's elite. The old Ethan would have hesitated, would have seen the suicidal folly of it. But the new Ethan, the man high on Serafina's intoxicating belief in him, saw it as an opportunity. A grand gesture, a shedding of his old, tired skin. "Okay," he heard himself say the word, feeling both terrifying and liberating. "I'll do it." Her smile was dazzling, triumphant. In that moment, he felt like a king. That decision set off a chain reaction of betrayals, each one colder and more calculated than the last. His life with Clara had to be systematically dismantled, and he went about it with the detached precision of a demolition expert. He met with his lawyer, a shark named Marcus Thorne, who specialized in discreet, high-net-worth dissolutions. "She can't touch the firm," Ethan insisted, "or my personal earnings from the Davenport project." She signed a prenup. "A 15-year-old prenup can be challenged, Ethan," Marcus warned, "especially given her non-financial contributions to your career. A good lawyer could argue she was an integral partner in your success." The thought of Clara getting half of what he considered his empire filled him with a cold fury. The woman who'd given up her career for him had now been reframed in his mind as a potential threat, a liability to be neutralized. Under Marcus's guidance, he began to move assets. He secured a second mortgage on their Bel Air home, forging Clara's signature on a document he'd slipped into a stack of routine papers for her to sign. The $500,000 went directly into a private account under his name only. He liquidated a joint investment portfolio they'd built for their retirement, telling Clara the market was too volatile and he was moving it into a more stable fund, a fund that again was solely his. Each lie was a stone laid on Clara's back, and he was oblivious to the weight. He was too consumed with the dazzling future Serafina represented. A future where he was untethered, powerful, and adored, not for his stability, but for his audacity. The final act of cruelty was the confrontation. He chose a Tuesday morning, a day devoid of any ceremony. Clara was in her home office, surrounded by the art history books she still read, voraciously cataloguing a small collection for a local gallery as a volunteer. It was her small corner of the world she'd lost. He stood in the doorway, his suit perfectly tailored, his expression a mask of detached resolve. "Clara, we need to talk," he began the classic cowardly opening. She looked up, her glasses perched on her nose. She knew. He could see it in her eyes. The quiet sadness from the closet had deepened into a weary resignation. But she waited for him to say the words. "I'm not happy," he said. "I haven't been for a long time. This life, this routine, it's not enough for me anymore." "And Serafina is?" she asked, her voice calm, devoid of the hysteria he had braced himself for. The fact that she knew the name sent a brief jolt of panic through him, but he pressed on. "This isn't about her. It's about me. I want more. More than a wife who has dedicated her entire adult life to your success." She asked, her composure starting to crack. "More than the home we built, the life we planned. Those were your plans, Clara. My plans have changed." He said the words feeling like acid in his own mouth, yet he couldn't stop them. "I've met with a lawyer. The papers have been drawn up. I think it's best if you move out. I'll help you get settled somewhere, of course." He expected tears, screaming, pleading. He did not expect the chillingly calm way she took off her glasses and placed them on a stack of books. "You've already mortgaged our home, haven't you, Ethan?" she said, her voice a flat line. "And the portfolio for our retirement. It's gone." He was stunned into silence. How could she possibly know? She gave a small, humorless smile. "I'm not a fool. I received a registered letter from the bank yesterday. They send them to both registered owners, you know. Even the one whose signature looks a little forced." She stood up. "You want me to move out of the house you've leveraged behind my back, from the life you've drained financially, so you can take your mistress to a gala in 2 weeks? The gala where we were supposed to be celebrating the groundbreaking of the museum. I helped you win." Each word was a precise, devastating blow. The guilt he'd suppressed for months surged hot and suffocating. But it was too late to turn back. He had chosen his path. "The prenup is ironclad, Clara," he said, his voice hard, trying to regain control. "We'll see," she replied, her eyes as cold and grey as a winter sea. "You have your new life, Ethan. I hope it's everything you dreamed of. Now get out of my office." He left the slam of her office door echoing through the cavernous, empty house. He felt a tremor of fear, a sense of having crossed a line into a dark, unknown territory. But then his phone buzzed. It was a picture from Serafina, the emerald green gown she had just bought for the gala. It was stunning. The fear receded, replaced by a fresh surge of anticipation. He was Ethan Hayes. He was a creator of masterpieces, and he was about to unveil his greatest one, yet his new life. The night of the Ethelred Foundation charity gala was electric. The air outside the Beverly Hilton buzzed with the flash of paparazzi cameras and the low growl of luxury cars pulling up to the red carpet. Ethan felt a surge of pure, unadulterated triumph. He adjusted his Tom Ford tuxedo, the fabric feeling like armor, and stepped out of his Porsche. Then he rounded the car and offered his hand to Serafina. She was a vision. The emerald gown clung to her like a second skin, a cascade of shimmering sequins that caught the light and the attention of every camera. On her throat was a diamond necklace so brilliant it seemed to radiate its own energy. When she took his arm, he felt a jolt of possession of pride. This was his. This woman. This life. This moment. Walking down the red carpet was a coronation. People called his name. Fellow architects, real estate moguls, city council members. They all looked at him with a new kind of respect, tinged with envy. They saw Serafina on his arm, and they understood. Hayes wasn't just a player anymore. He was in a different league entirely. Inside the ballroom was a breathtaking spectacle of crystal chandeliers and seas of white orchids. The elite of Los Angeles were all there, a glittering constellation of power and influence. Ethan navigated the room with Serafina, a conquering hero returning from war. He accepted congratulations on the Davenport project, his hand possessively on the small of Serafina's back. He felt invincible. And then he saw her. Clara was standing near the silent auction tables, speaking with an elderly woman on the foundations board. She was wearing a simple midnight blue velvet gown. It was elegant and understated, but next to Serafina's pyrotechnics, it looked almost monastic. She wore no jewelry, save for her wedding ring, which she hadn't yet removed, and a pair of simple pearl earrings. Her hair was pulled back in a classic chignon. She looked beautiful, but in his eyes, she looked like a ghost from a past life. A cruel, smug satisfaction filled him. Here was the proof. The timid academic past versus the dazzling, vibrant future. He decided in a moment of supreme arrogance to approach her. He wanted her to see up close what she had lost. He wanted to witness her crumble. "Clara," he said, his voice smooth as silk as they approached. "I'm surprised to see you here." Clara turned, and her eyes met his. There was no pain in them, no anger, just a calm, unnerving clarity. She then glanced at Serafina, her gaze lingering for a moment on the spectacular necklace before returning to Ethan. "Hello, Ethan," she said, her voice even. "I wouldn't miss it. The Foundation does such important work." She nodded politely at Serafina. "You must be Serafina. That's a beautiful gown." The lack of drama was disorienting. Serafina, who thrived on it, seemed momentarily thrown. "Thank you." She managed her hand tightening on Ethan's arm. "It truly is a spectacular evening." Ethan pressed on, refusing to lose his momentum. "Serafina is a great patron of the arts. She's been incredibly supportive of my vision for the museum." He was laying it on thick, twisting the knife. He wanted Clara to understand that her replacement wasn't just a beautiful face. She was his new muse, his new partner in ambition. Clara simply smiled, a small, enigmatic curve of her lips. "I'm sure she has," she said. "Vision requires a great deal of support." Before Ethan could formulate another pointed remark, a man he recognized as Julian Croft, the head of a major development group, strode over. "Ethan, my boy," Croft boomed, clapping him on the shoulder. He nodded at Serafina. "I see you're celebrating the Davenport win in style. Heard you dissolved the partnership at home, too. Bold move. Sometimes you have to cut weight to fly higher, eh?" The crass comment, meant as a compliment among men of their ilk, hung in the air. Ethan saw a flicker of something not hurt, but perhaps pity in Clara's eyes. She simply excused herself with quiet dignity. "Julian, it was lovely to see you. Please enjoy the evening." She walked away, not with the hurried retreat of a wounded animal, but with the steady, measured pace of someone with purpose. Ethan watched her go, a sliver of unease piercing his triumphant haze. He had expected tears, a satisfyingly dramatic confirmation of his victory. Her composure was unsettling. "Don't worry about her, darling," Serafina whispered in his ear, her voice a seductive purr. "She's yesterday's news. Tonight is about us." She was right. He shook off the feeling and allowed himself to be swept back into the intoxicating current of the evening. He made connections, sealed unspoken deals with a handshake and a shared glass of whiskey, and basked in the glow of Serafina's beauty and his own success. He was at the apex, the absolute summit of the life he had so ruthlessly engineered. From this height, he felt he could see forever. He didn't realize he was standing at the edge of a cliff and the ground was already crumbling beneath his feet. The evening was peaking. The main auction was about to begin, and the low hum of conversation was punctuated by the clinking of glasses and bursts of laughter. Ethan was holding court at his table, surrounded by a developer, a banker, and their wives, all of them hanging on his every word about the Davenport project. Serafina was beside him, radiant, her hand resting proprietary on his thigh. He felt like the king of the world. A waiter approached the table, his demeanor deferential. "Mr. Hayes, there is a gentleman who would like a word with you, in the library." Ethan was annoyed at the interruption. "Can you tell him I'm with guests?" "He was rather insistent, sir," the waiter murmured, his eyes flicking nervously towards a discreet door at the far end of the ballroom. "He said to mention it was regarding Miss Vincenzo." Ethan's heart gave a slight lurch. Perhaps her father had sent a car for her. He had never met the man who was a near mythical figure spoken of in hushed, reverent tones. Alistair Vincenzo, an old-money European industrialist with holdings in everything from Swiss banking to Argentinian agriculture. Serafina spoke of him with a mixture of adoration and childlike fear. "Darling, I think your father might have sent someone," he whispered to Serafina. She looked momentarily panicked. "Daddy's here. He never comes to these things." "He's not here. He just sent someone who wants to see me," Ethan reassured her, his ego preening at the thought. Perhaps the great man wanted to meet the architect who had captured his daughter's heart. Excusing himself from the table, Ethan walked towards the library. The room was a stark contrast to the ballroom's opulence, panelled in dark mahogany, lined with leather-bound books, and smelling faintly of old paper and brandy. A single lamp cast a warm glow on a large desk. A man was standing by the unlit fireplace, his back to the door, staring at a maritime painting on the wall. He was tall and impeccably dressed in a bespoke suit that was notable only for its complete lack of flashiness. As Ethan entered, the man turned. He was perhaps in his late 60s, with a mane of silver hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. His eyes, a startlingly pale blue, held a chilling stillness. There was an aura of immense, unshakable power about him, a gravitational pull that seemed to suck the very air out of the room. This was no messenger. "Mr. Hayes," the man said. His voice was quiet, cultured, with the same faint, unplaceable European accent as his daughter. But where hers was musical, his was metallic. "I am Alistair Vincenzo. Thank you for joining me." Ethan felt a sudden prickling sweat on his brow. Mr. Vincenzo, it's an honor. Serafina didn't mention you would be in town. I am not in town. I flew in this afternoon for the sole purpose of this conversation. Alistair said his words precise and cold. He gestured to one of the leather armchairs. Please. Ethan sat feeling like a schoolboy called to the principal's office. Alistair remained standing, a predator observing its prey. You are the architect for the new Davenport Museum, Alistair stated. A significant achievement. Thank you, sir. It's the project of a lifetime, Ethan replied, trying to inject some confidence into his voice. Indeed. Alistair continued, his pale eyes boring into Ethan. Legacy is important. My family has been a quiet benefactor of the Ethelred Foundation for many years. We believe in building things that last. Institutions, reputations, families. He paused, letting the last word hang in the air. Which brings me to you. He took a slow step forward. My daughter is vivacious. She enjoys shiny things. And for the last 6 months you have been her shiniest new toy. Ethan bristled. Sir, with all due respect, my feelings for your daughter are genuine. Alistair emitted a soft, dry sound that was not quite a laugh. Feelings, Mr. Hayes, do not insult my intelligence. You are a man who has just torched a 15-year marriage to a woman who by all accounts was your partner in every sense of the word. You did this not for feelings, but for what you believe my daughter represents an upgrade, a shortcut into a world you are desperate to join. He began to walk slowly around Ethan's chair. Let me tell you what I have learned in the past 72 hours since I first became aware of your existence. I learned that you forged your wife's signature to indebt the home she made for you. I learned that you liquidated your shared assets into a private account. I learned that you abandoned her with a prenup you believed to be ironclad, leaving the woman who sacrificed her career for yours with next to nothing. Ethan's blood ran cold. How did you? I employ people who find things out, Mr. Hayes. It is what I do. Alistair interrupted, his voice dropping to a near whisper. What you have done is not the act of an ambitious man. It is the act of a common, dishonorable thief. And you have done it while flaunting my daughter as your prize. He stopped directly in front of Ethan, leaning down slightly. There are rules, Mr. Hayes. My daughter in her naivete does not understand them. But I do. The first rule is, family is not a tool for social climbing. The second and more important rule is you do not bring public shame upon my house. By bringing my daughter here tonight on your arm, while your wife is in the same room, you have publicly branded Serafina a homewrecker. You have made the Vincenzo name a feature in your sordid little melodrama. This is an insult I will not tolerate. Ethan was speechless, his mind reeling. This was not happening. The necklace my daughter is wearing. Alistair continued, his voice lethally calm. The Vincenzo star. It has been in my family for over a century. It is worn only by the women of my blood on significant public occasions. For her to wear it tonight with you is a profound insult to her mother, her grandmother, and to me. She believes it is a declaration of love. You believe it is a symbol of your victory. To me, it is a sign of your grotesque presumption. Ethan finally found his voice, a weak, reedy thing. I love her. Alistair straightened up, a look of utter contempt on his face. You love what you think I can do for you. Allow me to demonstrate exactly what I can do to you. He pulled a phone from his pocket and made a call. Julian Alistair Vincenzo. Yes, it has been too long. I am calling about the Davenport project. My consortium North Star Holdings is the primary silent investor behind your development group. Yes, that is correct. We are pulling our funding, effective immediately. Your new architect, Mr. Hayes, has proven to be a man of questionable moral character, and I do not invest in compromised foundations, be they concrete or personal. Find a new architect. He hung up before a sputtering Julian Croft could reply. Ethan stared at him, his mouth agape, the world tilting on its axis. "That was your legacy," Alistair said softly. "It's gone." He made another call. "Mr. Dubois at Credit Suisse." "Alistair, I have the account number I mentioned. I am flagging it for immediate investigation under the bank's morality and reputational risk clause. The funds are illicitly gained from a fraudulent mortgage application and liquidated marital assets. Freeze it." "Yes." "Thank you." He pocketed the phone. "That was your money." Ethan tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't obey. His entire future, his entire meticulously constructed world had been dismantled in less than 2 minutes. "My daughter will be on a plane to Geneva within the hour," Alistair stated. "She will be upset, but she will get over it. What you will not get over, Mr. Hayes, is this lesson. You sought to join a world you do not understand, and you broke its rules. You are a man of poor aesthetics, after all. You mistook the glitter for the gold." Alistair walked to the door and opened it. The sounds of the gala, the music and laughter rushed in, sounding alien and obscene. "You may return to your party," he said, his pale eyes devoid of any emotion. "You have nothing left, but you have all night to enjoy it." He stepped out, leaving Ethan alone in the silent, suffocating library, a ghost at a feast that was no longer his. Ethan stumbled out of the library, his body numb, his mind a screaming void. The vibrant ballroom now looked grotesque, a garish parody of the triumph he had felt only minutes before. He saw Julian Croft across the room, his face pale, frantically speaking into his phone. He saw the banker he'd been charming earlier, now avoiding his gaze. The news was already spreading through the room's invisible network, a virus of his own making. He made it back to his table. Serafina's chair was empty. His champagne glass was still half full. He picked it up, his hand shaking so badly that the golden liquid sloshed over the rim. He looked around wildly, and then he saw her, near the grand entrance, flanked by 2 imposing men in dark suits he hadn't noticed before. Alistair was speaking to her, his expression unreadable. Serafina was crying her face a mask of disbelief and anguish. She looked across the room, and her eyes met Ethan's. There was no love there, no solidarity, only the horrified, accusing stare of a child whose favorite toy had just been revealed to be poisonous. Then she turned and was gone, swallowed by the night. The fallout was brutally swift. His phone began to vibrate incessantly. The first message was from his senior partner at Hawthorne and Finch Emergency Partners meeting. "My office. 7 a.m. The second was a notification from his bank. "Your account has been frozen pending an internal review." The third was a terse email from Julian Croft's legal team, formally terminating his contract on the Davenport project, citing a breach of the morality clause. He fled the gala, enduring the gauntlet of confused and pitying stares. He drove not to his house, Clara's house he now realized, but to the apartment he had secretly been renting for his trysts with Serafina. The one place that felt like his own. When he arrived, the key card was declined. A note was taped to the door. Lease terminated. Please contact building management to arrange for removal of personal effects. Alistair Vincenzo did not leave loose ends. The next few weeks were a descent into a special kind of hell. The partners at his firm bought him out for a pittance, eager to distance themselves from the scandal. His name was scrubbed from the company website overnight. Former clients and colleagues crossed the street to avoid him. The story of the architect who flew too close to the sun and had his wings melted by a vengeful tycoon became a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. He was a pariah. He tried to fight the frozen bank account, but Alistair's legal team was a leviathan. They produced a signed affidavit from a forensics expert confirming Clara's signature had been forged on the mortgage documents. Criminal charges were mentioned. Ethan's lawyer, Marcus, advised him to surrender the funds immediately. All of it, the $500,000 from the house, the liquidated retirement fund, was transferred to Clara. He was forced to sell his Porsche to cover his mounting legal fees. He moved into a sterile, soulless, corporate apartment in the valley. The man who designed glass houses now lived in a box with a view of a parking lot. He was alone adrift in the wreckage of a life he had single-handedly destroyed. Meanwhile, Clara moved with a quiet, devastating efficiency he never knew she possessed. She had not been idle in the weeks leading up to the gala. The registered letter from the bank had been the final confirmation of a betrayal she had suspected for months. The subtle changes in Ethan's behavior, the scent of a strange perfume, the emotional distance she had pieced it all together with the meticulous precision of the art historian she was. She hadn't gone to the gala to confront him. She had gone because her old mentor from Colombia, the elderly woman she was speaking with, was now on the board of the Ethelred Foundation. She was there to reconnect with a world she had left behind, to begin rebuilding her life on her own terms. She never knew Alistair Vincenzo would be there. She never knew the spectacular implosion was coming. It was a bizarre karmic intervention she hadn't asked for, but which had nonetheless cleared the board. Her divorce lawyer, a sharp, empathetic woman named Eleanor Vance, was astounded. In 25 years of practice, she said, I have never seen a case resolve itself so completely. With the returned funds and the additional settlement from the dissolution of their remaining shared assets, Clara was financially secure. But more than that, she was free. The weight of Ethan's ambition, which she had carried for so long, was finally lifted. The first thing she did was put the Bel Air house on the market. It held too many ghosts. She sold it quickly, wanting a clean break. The second thing she did was re-enroll at Columbia University to finally finish the PhD she had abandoned for a man who had proven to be a poor investment. 18 months can feel like a lifetime, or no time at all. For Clara, it was a period of deliberate, painstaking reconstruction. For Ethan, it was a slow, grinding erosion. Their paths, once inextricably intertwined, had diverged so sharply they might as well have been living on different planets. Clara's new dawn began not with a triumphant sunrise, but with the quiet grey of a pre-dawn sky. After the dust from the divorce and the sale of the Bel Air house settled, she found herself in a spacious but empty apartment on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. She had the financial means, the freedom and a future that was a terrifying, exhilarating blank canvas. For the first few weeks, the silence of the apartment was a roaring abyss. For 15 years, her life had been defined by Ethan's needs, his schedule, his ambitions. The sound of his Porsche in the driveway, the scent of his cologne on a discarded shirt, the low murmur of his late-night calls. These had been the ambient noises of her existence. Without them, she felt unmoored. She could have easily slipped into a life of quiet luxury lunches with other well-off divorcees, charity committees, gallery openings. But the thought was nauseating. It felt like a different kind of gilded cage. The fire that Ethan's betrayal had ignited within her was not one of rage, but one of reclamation. She had a life to get back, a mind to re-engage. The day she walked back onto the Columbia University campus, a knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. She was 42 years old, surrounded by graduate students in their 20s who debated Foucault in the coffee line and had never known a world without the internet. She felt like an imposter, a relic from another era. In her first seminar, she remained silent, her voice trapped behind a wall of self-doubt. What if she'd lost it? What if the sharp, analytical mind she once had atrophied from years of disuse of focusing on fabric swatches for Ethan's clients and remembering which city councilman liked his steak rare? Her old mentor, Dr. Alistair Finch, a man whose name was a strange, cosmic echo of Ethan's old firm, saw her hesitation. He was a kind, wizened man, with eyes that held the patient wisdom of someone who had spent a lifetime with history. After that first class, he asked her to stay behind. "Clara," he said gently, "the books haven't changed, and neither has the brilliant mind that once impressed me so. You have something these kids don't lived experience. Don't run from it. Use it." That conversation was the key. She stopped seeing her past as a liability and began to see it as a lens. She threw herself into her studies with a ferocity that surprised even herself. The late nights returned, but they were different. She wasn't poring over blueprints to catch her husband's mistakes. She was in the hushed, sacred halls of the Butler Library, surrounded by the ghosts of scholars, tracing the intricate webs of power and influence that defined the Renaissance. She was doing it for herself. The work felt pure sacred. Her thesis became her magnum opus, Renaissance patronage, power, piety, and personal legacy. She wrote with a unique, incisive perspective on how the Medicis and the Borgias used art to construct their public identities, to launder their reputations, and to build legacies that would outlast their mortal sins. Without ever writing his name, she was deconstructing Ethan's entire life philosophy, exposing the hollow core of ambition, devoid of integrity. She wasn't just writing a dissertation. She was performing an exorcism. When she successfully defended her thesis, her panel of professors gave her a standing ovation. Dr. Finch's eyes shone with pride. "Welcome back, Dr. Hayes," he had said. And in that moment, she decided to reclaim her full name. She was Dr. Clara Hayes now. The title was not a shield, but a declaration of a self reforged in fire. Success followed with a momentum that felt like fate. Her thesis was published by a university press and became a surprise crossover hit, praised for its accessible prose and its timely exploration of art, power, and reputation. Invitations to speak at symposiums turned into offers for visiting professorships. And then came the call from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. They were planning a landmark exhibition on the patrons of the High Renaissance and wanted her to consult to be a guest curator, which led her to this crisp autumn afternoon, walking out of the Met's imposing stone arches, not as a visitor, but as a respected colleague. The meeting had been a dream. The museum's lead curator had listened to her ideas with rapt attention, treating her not as a dilettante, but as a peer whose insights were invaluable. She walked out into the October air, feeling a sense of peace and purpose so profound it was almost dizzying. This was real. This was hers. She had built this. Ethan's dusk had been a slow, humiliating slide. After the gala, his world collapsed in stages. First went the career, then the money, then the so-called friends. He spent the first few months in a state of furious disbelief, convinced he could recover. He was Ethan Hayes. He called old contacts, attempted to leverage past favors. He was met with a chorus of polite but firm rejections. The name Alistair Vincenzo was a password that locked every door he tried to open. No one would risk associating with the man who had so spectacularly offended a Titan. His arrogance soured into a curdled bitterness. He blamed everyone. He blamed Serafina for being a naive child. He blamed Alistair for being a vindictive monster. Most of all, he blamed Clara. In the twisted logic of his self-pity, he decided that if she had been more exciting, more like Serafina, he would never have strayed. If she had been more grateful for the life he provided, she wouldn't have been so cold and unyielding at the end. He refused to see the fault in himself. The ego that had propelled him to the top was now the anchor that dragged him to the bottom. The money from the Porsche ran out. He sold his Patek Philippe watch, then the art from his apartment, then his designer suits, piece by painful piece. Each sale was a fresh humiliation. He, the arbiter of taste and aesthetics, was haggling with consignment shop owners over the value of his former life. He was forced to find work. His resume, once a glittering testament to his genius, was now a toxic asset. The name Ethan Hayes was too well known in the circles he once inhabited. He had to seek anonymity. His first job was stocking shelves overnight at a high-end grocery store. He who had once debated the merits of Italian marble with billionaires now spent his nights stacking organic kale and artisan cheeses he could no longer afford. He lasted 3 weeks before his simmering rage boiled over at a manager half his age, and he was fired. He drifted through a series of other menial jobs, a valet parking cars that were once his peers, a call center agent dealing with angry customers. Each job chipped away another piece of his identity until he was awe. He gained weight. His sharp, tailored silhouette softened into a puffy, defeated slump. The light in his eyes, once a beacon of fierce ambition, dimmed to a dull ember of resentment. Finally, he landed the job with the Parks Department. It was steady, it was union, and it was utterly anonymous. No one cared who he was. His supervisor, a man named Sal, only cared if his sector was clean by the end of his shift. The work was mindless, physical, and humbling. He spent his days in the jewel of the city central park, a place he had only ever experienced from the window of a limousine or a penthouse apartment. Now he was at ground level, dealing with its filth. He saw the wealthy jogging past him, the power brokers taking lunch on benches, the beautiful women who reminded him of Serafina, of Clara, of everything he had lost. The park was a daily 8-hour torture session of his own failure. On that particular autumn afternoon, he was working the path near the carousel. The air was filled with the laughter of children and the tinny music of the organ. He speared a discarded coffee cup with his grabber, his movements automatic, his mind a familiar swamp of bitter nostalgia. He thought of Clara. He often did not with love, but with a kind of obsessive, resentful curiosity. He imagined she had probably remarried some boring stable banker, living out her quiet life in subdued elegance. The thought gave him a small, sour satisfaction. He had been the sun in her life, he told himself. Now she was probably living in the shadows. He straightened up to empty his bin, and a flash of color caught his eye. A woman in a camel hair coat, walking with a confident, purposeful stride. There was something in her posture, an elegance, a grace that was achingly familiar. She turned her head slightly to look at a busker playing the cello, and the afternoon light caught her profile. The recognition was not a gentle dawning. It was a physical blow, a punch to the gut that knocked the air from his lungs. It was Clara, but it wasn't the Clara he remembered. This woman was different. She was luminous, radiating a self-possession and a quiet power he had never seen in her. She looked younger, happier, and more vibrant than she had in their last 10 years of marriage. In that instant, his entire narrative of self-pity shattered. He was not the son she had lost. He was the anchor she had cut loose. He saw his own reflection in the grimy plexiglass of his trash cart, a paunchy, red-faced man in a drab green uniform, holding a garbage claw. The chasm between them was not one of circumstance. It was a moral and spiritual Grand Canyon. Clara, feeling a gaze upon her, turned. Her eyes scanned the path and then settled on him. He saw the flicker of recognition, the brief widening of her eyes, the slight parting of her lips. He saw her take in the uniform, the grabber, the pathetic wreck he had become. He braced himself for the reaction he craved and dreaded in equal measure, a gasp of horror, a sneer of contempt, perhaps even a flash of triumphant pity. But Clara's expression settled into something he could not comprehend. It was a profound, unnerving calm. It was the look of a historian observing a ruin, understanding its origins, its purpose, and the reasons for its inevitable decay. There was no hatred in her eyes, for that would mean he still held power over her emotions. There was no schadenfreude, for that would mean his fate brought her joy. There was only a deep, distant, and utterly final pity. He stood frozen, a statue of shame. He wanted to speak, to call her name, to offer some pathetic excuse, but his throat was clogged with the ashes of his burned-down life. What could he possibly say? Clara held his gaze for a long, silent moment. In that moment she saw the full arc of their story. The bright beginning, the slow poisoning of ambition, the brutal end, and this surreal epilogue. She felt a final vestigial pang for the young man she had once loved, the brilliant dreamer who had gotten so terribly lost. Then she gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was not a greeting. It was not forgiveness. It was an acknowledgement of a debt paid, a chapter closed, a ghost laid to rest. She turned and continued her walk, her stride unbroken, her back straight and strong. She didn't look back. She was walking toward her future, toward the brilliant lights of the museum that awaited her expertise. Ethan watched her go, until her camel coat was just a small, elegant speck swallowed by the vibrant chaos of the city. He looked down at the garbage claw in his hand, at the half-filled bin of other people's refuse. The laughter of the children on the carousel seemed to mock him. The permanent dusk had settled, and he finally understood. He hadn't just been betrayed by a tycoon. He had been betrayed by his own character. He had built his life out of glass, and he had been the one to cast the first fatal stone. He turned back to his work, another piece of trash waiting to be collected. The story of Ethan Hayes is a chilling reminder that the foundations we build our lives upon are far more than just money and success. Loyalty, integrity, and the quiet sacrifices of those who love us are the true cornerstones. He traded a priceless partnership for a fleeting illusion of power, only to discover that some debts can never be repaid. His spectacular fall from grace wasn't just about losing a fortune. It was about losing his soul piece by piece until nothing was left but an empty shell. It's a powerful lesson in remembering that the highest ladders are often the most precarious, especially when you step on others to climb them. If this story resonated with you, and if you believe in the power of consequences and the quiet strength of those who are wronged, please take a moment to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who might appreciate a story of justice and rebirth, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more real-life dramas that explore the complexities of human nature. Your support allows us to keep telling these important stories. Thank you for listening.